Various cast-ons are used for various different purposes. Some are attractive, some are sturdy, some are stretchy. Some have all three characteristics. I'm going to demonstrate the Channel Island cast-on. The Channel Island cast-on starts with a long tail, just like some other cast-ons. In this case, the long tail gets folded and doubled. I'll get to, at the end of this video, we'll discuss how long to make the tail. You can start the Channel Island cast-on with a slip knot, just as you can start any other cast-on with a slip knot. I prefer not to use one. You position the yarn in your hands to start the same way you would for long tail. Over the index, over the thumb, yarn's held in the center of the hand. And make the first stitch by twisting the needle. Then grab hold of this tail to keep it out of your way and make your first stitch. Now you need to reposition the yarn. The yarn needs to come into the space between your index finger and your thumb and then wrapped around your thumb twice. The needle goes into this double wrap, picks up a stitch off the index finger, brings the stitch forward, and then this double wrap is gently tightened. The result now is the single yarn is in front and the double yarn is in back. The single yarn is brought under to the back, over the needle, and your hands are once again in position to make the next stitch. Tighten up that loop, bring the single yarn to the back, make a yarn over. Now the double yarn is between your thumb and index finger. It gets wrapped twice around the thumb, and a stitch is made. The stitch is gently tightened up. The single yarn is brought under, over the needle. The double yarn is wrapped twice around the thumb, and a stitch is made. Yarn over, double wrap, pick up a stitch, snug up the yarn, yarn over, double wrap, pick up the stitch, snug up the yarn, yarn over, double wrap, pick up the stitch, tighten up the double wrap, yarn over. It's actually quite simple once you get used to it. Now, one of the things that does happen with any sort of long tail is your tail long enough? Well, in my case it is, because I'm doing only a few. But suppose I was doing a large cast-on and estimated what I thought would be the right amount of yarn for the cast-on, and as I got to the end of my cast-on, I found myself with only a few bits of yarn left. I could do two things. I could take another strand of yarn and pass it through the loop and extend my cast-on quite simply, making it much longer. Just very simply. The other thing I could do is just with a scrap of yarn, I could use right up to the very last inch of, say, cast-on to make a stitch, because I'd have enough yarn here to maneuver. So if you're running short, you don't have to worry, because this cast-on is very, very easy to extend the tail. When you first look at this cast-on, it doesn't look particularly special. But this cast-on is usually worked with a garter stitch for the first couple of rows, and after the first row, you'll see very clearly the advantage to this cast-on. Those twists, when the yarn comes, the single yarn comes down and underneath, add elasticity to this cast-on, making it very stretchy. And that double twist of the yarn, it makes a small knot or bump at the bottom of the cast-on. And the result is, that we'll see just after we finish this first row, and this cast-on is traditionally done with garter stitch as the first few rows. Let's come here, and the last stitch. Oops. Slide that back again. The last stitch. You can see now, just after the first row, what an attractive picot-like edge it makes. You can also see, even on the needle, that this cast-on can stretch out. And when it's not stretched out, it has this nice picot. I see I didn't quite tighten it there, and that is one of the concerns. You have to be sure to have a very even tension to have an attractive cast on. But look at those pretty little picot knots. And look at the amount of stretch because of the twists. You can see the twisted yarns here in between each stitch. This makes the Channel Island cast on strong because of the double yarn at the bottom, stretchy because of the twists, and attractive because of the picots. It's a very wonderful cast on to know. I hope you'll add it to your repertoire.